Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Common Sense, brought to you by OVB, Ohio Valley Bank. Today we have a very special guest. This is the person that usually sets up all of our other guests and arranges for all the shows and all the content that we have during this show. So today I'd like to welcome Bryna Butler. She's the Vice President of Corporate Communications for Ohio Valley Bank. And today we'll talk a little bit about internet and mobile banking. So welcome, Bryna.
Well, thank you for having me, Ryan. It's nice to be in the background, but kind of step up for one episode.
We were just talking before we went on live, and it's a little different sitting on this side of the table.
Absolutely.
And so now you'll have a little better feel to get folks to come on and share information. So, yep. So maybe start out a little bit by telling us about what you do at the bank, about yourself, what you do at the bank.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I've been at Ohio Valley Bank for 21 years now. I started back in 1996, actually as an intern for the University of Grande. I was able to start there in what they called back then the desktop publishing department. Mm-hmm. Just kind of worked my way up there. I'm Vice President of Corporate Communications for the bank now. And that department entails media relations, our financial literacy programs, and mobile and internet banking development.
Wow, that sounds like a lot on your plate.
Thanks. Thanks. Well,
keeps you busy. That's
not nearly as much as my 2 teenage sons at home, but it does keep me busy and hopping.
I understand. So, when we think about banking and online banking and mobile banking, mobile devices, I think one thing that comes first and foremost is security. Mm-hmm. So, what types of things are you seeing in the market that helps protect internet?
There are a lot of different things, and some of those things run behind the scenes more. Security is a top priority, not only for my institution, but also banks across the nation. And some of the things that you see, most banks have 2 main systems that run in the background that all users probably don't see or get in contact with that much. One would be a transaction monitoring system. Nearly all banks run that kind of software that looks at transactions, and they're looking for red flags like, was this person usually in Gallipolis, Ohio, and made a transaction with their debit card at 8 a.m., but later at 9 o'clock made a transaction in Dallas, Texas.
Sure.
That's a major red flag. And,
yeah.
and just looking for abnormal behaviors. So transaction monitoring is an important part of that, as well as many banks with their internet and mobile banking do what's called multi-factor authentication, and that's also kind of doing some of that geolocating, looking at where does the customer usually log in from, what time of day do they usually log in, is there anything that throws a red flag that this might not be who they say they are. And so those kind of things run in the background. Some banks also do out-of-wallet questions. So if you're doing a high-risk transaction, that they can ask you a question from your credit file, or maybe a question that you set up previously,
sure,
and have you answer to help verify who you are. Some banks do what's called 2-factor authentication, or a one-time passcode, where they will send you a passcode by text or a phone call to a mobile device, usually to your phone, that you have on file. Yep. And so you plug that back in to verify you are who you say you are.
Sure.
Beyond that, also some banks will use a hard token. So token oftentimes looks like a keychain, or maybe it's an app on your phone that produces that one-time passcode that you can use to get into internet banking, but something you have, so that if a hacker should get into your computer device while you're doing internet banking, and they can keylog and steal passwords and that kind of thing, they can't own that device that you own that's giving your passcode.
Right.
So it's an extra step of authentication to make sure you're generally you. But passwords is the most basic component, most important, I think. Often overlooked, definitely.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I want to back up just a second. And true story, happened to me and my wife on vacation that didn't think about it, but just got on the airplane, flew to California, went to buy something, debit card declined.
Okay.
So we're like, no, try it again, declined. And so I called the bank, and it's a perfect security measure for that reason that you mentioned earlier, that is that an abnormal transaction?
Absolutely. Many banks do that, and typically in the banking industry, we refer to that as a travel advisory. So if you're planning on going out of state, somewhere that you don't usually go to, you always want to call your bank and give them a heads up ahead of time. Let them know what cards you could possibly be using. That way they can place an alert on that file to know that that could be actually you at those dates.
Sure.
That's in Alaska or California or Texas.
And there's some states locally that, not if you're going to West Virginia, for example, you don't need to do that, or Kentucky.
Correct.
Maybe, but
Correct.
but if it's Texas or Florida or California, some of the higher risk.
Florida especially, a lot of fraudsters kind of based in that area of the country, and so a lot of banks really look closely at transactions coming out of there.
Sure, okay. And then you said something else too, just made a comment about high risk transactions. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what those are.
In the internet banking world, a high risk transaction would be any kind of transaction that takes money out of your ownership. So within your ownership profile, maybe you are a single owner on a checking account, but you're on a savings account with your husband, and maybe a college club CD with your kids. Anything that you have ownership of, if you're transferring between those accounts, it's not as much risk as if you're transferring out to somewhere else. So maybe a bill pay transaction, maybe a high risk transaction, or any type of transaction where you're electronically sending money to someone else.
Okay, that's good information. It's and just little tidbits that come right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, as far as the actual banker of what you need to do, going on vacation or to be aware of those higher risk transactions. So, and then you just mentioned passwords. And then with mobile banking and internet banking, passwords absolutely are a must.
Passwords is something I'm a really strong advocate of. I know at Ohio Valley Bank we try to make things convenient for customers, and we do have a lot of customers that really don't want password changes, and so we try to be respectful of that, but we do require a password change twice a year.
Okay.
Some banks will be more so on that. Maybe you have to change every 90 days or every 30 days. But that's kind of the medium ground we found to still be convenient for our customers. But the more often you change your passwords, the more secure you are. And I give this example. Say you do have a virus on your computer or a keylogger that is looking at all the information, unknowing to you, looking at all your information on your computer. Well, they could possibly obtain a password. If they have that password, the studies show they hold that password for a period of time. So they may hold that for a month or 3 months before they even try it. That's sometimes because they're selling it to someone else, most likely in most of the situations, or they're just holding it until they have several. But these identity thieves tend to hold those passwords for a period of time. So if you are in the business of changing your password often, chances are that when they go to use this password, it will no longer be of use to them because you've already moved on from that. So changing your password often is important. Having a strong password is very important. And you might ask, what makes a strong password? So how many characters, you think about your internet banking password there, Ryan. How many characters would you say that password would be?
It's at least 12.
That is incredible.
It's great. It's almost a full sentence.
That is great. That's what everybody should be doing. At least 8 characters and minimum. Our password field goes up to 25. You can do up to 25. A few things to think about. If you can do a number, a letter, and a special character, all 3, do it, because that makes it harder. Never use dictionary words in your password. I'm sure you've heard that at some time. Never use the same password as your ID, and this is a problem that we at our bank had seen in the past. Our system doesn't allow you to do that, but some banks could possibly allow you to do that. What happened, the odd thing that happens when you do that, say, to make it easier, you're going to make your ID and your password the same. So let's say you decided you were going to make it, I'll just pull something out of the air, you're going to make it Evan 2017 because maybe you have a son named Evan. So you decide you're going to make your ID and password the same, Evan 2017. Well, Mike, who's running the camera for us, Mike might actually also have maybe a grandson named Evan, and he decided Evan 2017 was a good password for him, but he has a different ID. So the system allowed him to do that because his ID was different from yours. Well, one day Mike gets he's really trying to get into his internet banking fast and really frustrated. So he types in his password as fast as he can, types in the ID as fast as he can, and he gets locked out because he's not really thinking, he's just doing it as fast as he can. So he keeps trying and trying and trying. And in that combination with him being frustrated, he's accidentally typed in his password twice and for his ID and password, and he's gotten into your account.
Into your account.
So you never want to do ID, a password that are the same. And some, like I said, some banking systems won't let you do that, like ours, but some will. So you want to make sure you don't do that. And another important thing is to never, you should not, if you can help it, should never use your password that you use for your internet banking for anything else. Because while the bank takes a lot of steps to make sure that information is secure for you, we can't say the same for other online stores or anything like that, that if they're hacked, they've now got your internet banking password. So, and that's what a lot of these folks do, these scammers that will go in and hack maybe a small store online, and they get the passwords, then they go around and try those passwords at banks and try to get into accounts. Because the stores are easier targets than trying to hack the bank.
Right.
So it's important to only use your internet banking password for internet banking.
That's very good advice. And just a couple other thoughts on passwords. Don't name it after your dog.
Absolutely. No anniversary
no
dates, no birthdays.
Kids' names.
Kids' names, you probably shouldn't do that as well.
Yeah, yeah. And what's the best way? I know if you're like me, I've got 20 different passwords that I deal with on a daily basis. And it can be frustrating. I think I've got a system now managed to where I can I can remember them. But I know writing them all down and folding them up and putting them in a...
Right. You never want to write them down, leave them on a Post-it on your computer or anything like that. And I'm sure you've heard that before. One of the safest things that you can do, there is software out there just for this purpose, typically called a password vault. And you can use those, and they're often, you do have to remember the password for the password vault, but that's one password. And once you open your vault, you can store all your passwords in there. But try to refrain from writing them down, or try to think of a system in order to...
And you say that's, is that an app or can
yeah,
be?
there are several companies that do those apps. I know Norton, that's very famous for their antivirus software. They have a really good password vault.
Okay. And then you still have to remember the password to get into that,
you do
as
have
well
to
as the
remember your
password to
for
get
your
into the
password
computer
vault,
or
but
phone. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
But it minimizes how many you have to have.
Well, Bryna, this is great information, but we need to take just a short break, and we will be right back in just after a few minutes and talk more with Bryna Butler about more online and mobile banking. Welcome back to Common Sense, brought to you by Ohio Valley Bank. Today's guest is Bryna Butler, and so far we've had a great conversation on security, internet passwords, passwords for mobile banking. So is there anything that we left out, Bryna, on when we're talking about passwords, security?
I think that sometimes banking customers can get really taken aback by all the security, you know, and get scared. Well, should I even be doing internet banking if there is a security risk involved? And I like to give them this example. Think about your account statement. Now, you get your account statement in the mail on paper. It comes to your mailbox. Who can take it out of your mailbox?
With account numbers, with balances.
Yes, anybody can take it out of your mailbox. Yeah. It's as simple to access it as opening anybody that can open an envelope can open that and get your information. If you have your account statement sent to you by e-delivery or an e-statement, you actually have to have an ID and password to access that. And even that, sometimes some of that information is masked on that statement. So think of it in terms that way. It is a little bit more risky, but you have all these different methods running behind the scenes, all these extra things to help make it safe. Yeah,
that's a good point. That you know, you hear scam or fraud of people going and stealing Social Security checks out of the mailboxes and whatever. Absolutely. And it's, I mean, it's the same principle. It's as easy as opening the mailbox, reaching in, taking it, and then there's all your information. So it's a good point. So with so much to think about security-wise, I know we just talked about being offline on banking a little bit, but we just talked about e-statements and being able to receive those. What other kinds of services are standard or available when you sign up for online banking?
When you're looking at a new bank and looking at online and mobile banking, it's important to know that some of the basics that any bank or credit union should have, most of them have some of these things. Of course, you want account balances. You want to be able to see transaction history so that you can research anything. Transfer between your accounts that are connected to that internet banking access. Free online bill pay, most offer that as well. So those are, and e-statements, of course, that we already mentioned, but those are the basics that every bank, if you're looking at doing mobile or internet banking with a bank, they should have, you should make sure they have those things in place because those are kind of the basics for everyone. But the innovation comes really quickly with internet and mobile banking, and I know we've seen it in our bank. It's important to note that just because a bank is large doesn't mean that they have things that your small community bank doesn't have. I know we run into this at High Valley Bank all the time. We've got a lot of the technology that the big banks have. So when you see that Chase commercial talking about freezing your card when you leave it behind at the restaurant, freezing your card on your mobile app, we have that.
Really?
A lot of community banks have those same kind of services. So it's important not to just discount the small community banks just because you don't think that technology is there. You need to find out for yourself. No.
Okay. That's interesting. I have seen that commercial. And,
a lot of people have.
Yeah, and I guess I've not asked about it, so I don't know. But
yeah, okay. Time and time again, they run those commercials, and I'll have a customer say, well, you guys should offer that. Well, yeah, we've offered that for the past 4 years. We do try to stay right on the edge, and as well as a lot of other community banks. So never discount a community bank because of technology, because chances are they may have those same things. You just need to ask.
Well, you mentioned bill pay a little bit ago, online bill pay, and I think it's important to talk just a few minutes about that, maybe, and the convenience and you know, if you forget to put a bill in the mail or you don't have time, you're running around.
Online bill pay is one of my favorite, personally. Online services, you can, with that, it has advanced a lot over the last few years, and so that people are not only paying their bills to a company, say you're paying your water bill or your electric bill, but they're paying each other. We have an actual module in ours that allows, if I wanted to send money to you, Ryan, for lunch, I could do that in a few simple clicks. And all I would need was your email address and your phone number to do that. So makes it really simple just to pass money even between friends. Just a month ago, we introduced a new module for our bill pay that will actually pull your full bill into bill pay. So say maybe I have DirecTV at home. I can set that up in my bill pay to pull my DirecTV bill right into my OVB bill pay, and then I can tell my bill pay to pay it when that bill comes to me, or I can tell it to not pay it, I want to see it first, or I can say pay it up to a certain threshold. That way if my son sneaks and buys some pay-per-view movies, I know about it. So the bill pay technology has come a long way in the last few years, and there's some really cool aspects about that right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. So can you, if you have loans at one place and your checking accounts at another, can you make payments? You can't do automatic transactions, if that's correct.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Say my checking account is at a High Valley Bank and my loan is at Chase. I'll use Chase because he's an example before. You can absolutely use bill pay to send that electronically to the other bank. It will send those payments electronically or by check. That's determined as to whether the receiver is in the National Electronic Database to receive electronic payments. But most banks are, because they have similar bill pay systems, and so they are added to that database to be able to accept electronic transactions.
Okay, that's interesting. So I know sometimes you see the initials ACH on your statement, or if you get online and look, and it's, you know, it'll say ACH transaction. Can you explain what that is?
So an ACH transaction is an electronic transaction, basically. Typically, ACH, our bank we'll see come through a lot of times people when they get payroll direct deposited. That is actually an ACH transaction that happens in the background. Typically, ACH is initiated by businesses between each other.
Okay.
When it's a smaller transfer, it's usually kind of a bill pay situation rather than ACH. ACH is governed by a national organization called NACHA. And by NACHA rules, how that happens is that happens in 2 steps. When that ACH transaction is initiated, the next day the person that is receiving the money gets their credit, and then a couple days later that money is taken from the person that pays that. That happens a little bit differently sometimes inside of banks because they'll sometimes take that money out and put it in a clearing account knowing that is going to come out. But those ACH transactions do have some rules tied with them. If you want to do an ACH transaction, say you're a business and you'd like to do direct payroll, direct deposit for your payroll, we can do that easily through the bank. We actually have a module of our NetTeller internet banking that handles ACH for customers.
Okay, interesting. So your business applications, when we start talking about business, you hear of Apple Pay, and using on your Android or Samsung Pay, whatever those are. Can you talk a little bit about that and how businesses can?
We're set up that our customers can pay with Apple Pay from their Ohio Valley Bank debit or credit card. We are not yet set up for Android or Samsung Pay. Businesses receiving those payments, that just depends on their processor that's processing their payments for them. So whoever is providing your swiper machine, that's who you need to talk to about receiving payments through Apple Pay or Android or Samsung Pay. In this area, we just haven't seen the adoption for Apple Pay or Android Pay, those forms yet, but that's something that I'm sure will grow with time as people use their mobile phones more and more to make transactions.
Okay. And I have another question, all this giving great information. So there's also, talking about commercials, and you see folks that can go to an ATM and sign a check or maybe even take a picture of the check and send it in. How does that work?
Okay. So so if you're in a situation where you're depositing in an ATM, that ATM has to be enabled for that capability. So we have a couple of locations that can do that at the bank. Typically, you're using your debit card instead of a deposit slip to deposit. So you use your debit card to authenticate yourself and tell the machine what account to put it into, and then you're depositing that check. It's important to remember when you're depositing money at an ATM, sometimes not all that amount is available to you right away. So it's typically cut off at maybe $100 or $200 how much you can get back right away because they have to further validate that check and make sure it's not a fake or anything. At Ohio Valley Bank, we also have mobile deposit, which is where you can take a picture of your check with your phone and deposit it. And that's part of our mobile banking app. We do same-day processing on that, so that if you take a picture of your check to deposit it before 5 o'clock, that amount is available for you in total the next morning. So
that's great.
It's a very nice service. We have a lot of people. We have a lot of people that take advantage of that every month.
As a business owner, say folks come in, write a bunch of checks. Is that an option for them, or is that?
Yeah, our mobile deposit is open for small businesses. If you deposit more than a few checks, of course, you don't want to take a picture of the front and back of every single check you deposit. And so we actually have a large-scale version of that called OVB Remote. And you get a scanner that's, I think they used to be about 8 inches by 8 inches square. So if you had an 8 by 8 inch square to spare on your desk, you could get one of these scanners, and they'll scan it and scan checks in volume and get them deposited where you want to. So we have that service available as well for anybody that's doing a large amount of checks.
That's it. Great. Well, I know we've talked about a lot of things, and a lot of things have. I used to be a lender several years ago, and things have changed 180 degrees since I've been there as far as access to the internet and internet banking and whatnot. But are there things that you see that might, if you're looking in the future, things that might be out there, might happen
We've
soon?
got something that's coming really soon. We have a functionality inside of our internet banking now called Budget Buddy. And Budget Buddy is kind of this, if you've ever been to mint.com or ever used Quicken, it's kind of like that, where it brings all your transactions in and lets you categorize your transactions and sort them and work on some budgeting and that kind of thing. And that's served us very well, but we decided to upgrade that, and it was time to get that service into this into the new year. And so we've worked all year to get that upgraded, and in the next couple of weeks we'll be announcing Benjamin Tracker, which is the newest version of that.
Okay.
Tracking the Benjamins, if you get that. But we'll be announcing Benjamin Tracker. You'll be able to pull in your information from your accounts at all your banks into this one interface in a very reliable way. It comes with a simpler budgeting tool. You can set goals with pictures so you can see what you're trying to achieve there. Easier tagging, and so you can see your spending habits, and a really cool cash flow calendar comes with that, and it's all free to customers. So that's one of the immediate things that's coming in Benjamin Tracker. We will have both Benjamin Tracker and Budget Buddy available for a time, both of them at the same time for a few months before Budget Buddy goes away, but Benjamin Tracker will be a really nice addition for our customers.
It does sound like an interesting tool to have to manage your finances. So, well, yeah, time has flown again as usual. We're already out of time. Thanks, Bryna. A lot of great information. And just on behalf of Ohio Valley Bank and Common Sense, I'd like to say, if you have any questions, please contact Bryna directly, or anybody there at the bank would be willing to help you on any of these programs that they have. So. I'm Ryan Mapes, and this is Bryna Butler. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.